You are listening to the Global CTE Podcast with your host, Sylvester Chisom.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Global CTE Podcast. I am your host, Sylvester Chisom. This is the place where we like to wrap a blanket of goodwill around our career tech education community and highlight the best, the brightest, the movers, the shakers, the innovators who are really working to prepare our students for success in the global marketplace. Today is no different. I have my friend Carlos Moreno. Now, let me tell you about Carlos. Carlos currently serves as co-executive director for Big Picture Learning, a nonprofit organization that has developed more than 200 such schools in the United States and around the world. He's also the author of the new book, Finding Your Leadership Soul: What Our Students Can Teach Us About Love, Care, and Vulnerability. Can't wait to dive into that. A proud native New Yorker, Carlos is a passionate education trailblazer committed to supporting school and district leaders in creating high-quality, innovative schools designed to tackle systemic equity issues. At heart, Carlos is an observer, a family man, a learner, a builder of community, a student, and a teacher. Someone who has simultaneously found and continues to seek his own leadership soul. Carlos, welcome to the podcast.
Good brother Sylvester. Thank you for having me, sir. Appreciate it.
Man, I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. Literally, as I move around the country, talking to education leaders, one name always comes up is Big Picture Learning. Have you seen what they're doing? Have you seen it? And of course, your name comes up as the leader, one of the people who are really moving that mission forward. And I'm super excited to talk about the new book and how we can help people in our audience find their leadership. So, but before we jump into all of that, man, what's the origin story? How did you get here?
I appreciate that the word of, the spoken word of mouth got us to this place. That says a lot. I firmly believe that when other folks say good things about your work and your organization, that's louder than one saying it about their own self. So that's big for me. It means a lot.
Absolutely.
I often start my intros by just saying I am at heart a kid from the Bronx that is trying to leave this world in a place that is way better than how I entered it. I initially had no intentions on going into the area of education. As a young person, I was joyful, I was curious, I was big, but had no interest in going into the education field because primarily I wasn't moved by the experiences I personally had, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could count probably on one hand how many teachers I felt like cared about me beyond what, how I performed in a classroom. And it's just, there was a disconnect for me, right? Like it just, that wasn't it. But it's sometimes it's so powerful when other people see things in yourself that you can't see for your own self, right? Like people see it in you. I'll fast forward to, I'm in college, I'm doing the thing, I'm playing ball, I'm active in my fraternity, and this brother who was in another fraternity, Danique Dali, we used to do some service work together, and we used to work with some young people in the south side of Providence. And he was the first person that picked up on the joy that I found when working with young people. He was a master's in teaching student, and I was finishing my undergrad, and that brother was just like, you going into business? I was a business major. He was like, yo, we need more brothers in education. See how you light up. And I was on my high horse, so I was just like, I was like, I'm going out to make some money, right? And I reminded him that he and I had two very different schooling experiences, as he had attended, mostly parochial and private schools in the Bronx, right? as well. So, um, but I didn't know his full story. So, but nonetheless, I went off and then we found our ways. The universe brings people together in different ways. I went off, graduated, and, worked in the for-profit and international nonprofit. And then I ran into him like 4 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a teacher at the founding Big Picture Learning School. It was about to expand and it received some significant funding from the Gates Foundation to expand across the country. And he told me about this model that he had been at. It was everything that he thought I'd love and believe education should be, even before I had a full formed idea of what education should be. And that was it, brother. I visited, I spent time with young people at the school. I saw the relationships between the adults and the young people with one another, the quality of the work that they were doing and the relevance around the work that they were doing. And these were young people that looked and sounded the way I did at their age, right? Like we had very similar and shared experiences and backgrounds, and how adults talked about young people when the young people weren't around. That was for me a big telling part of like what this school was and what this design was, right? Like, when I was young, I always knew how the adults spoke about young people. This wasn't it. This was asset focused, like moving forward, reflective work. So, and I was just trying to be a part of it. So the journey carried on and I was in the system, and 20 years later, I have the honor of serving as co-executive director of the organization.
Now, was this at what school? What
This was
school was
the
this?
this was the Met School in Providence,
In Rhode Island? Okay.
the
All
the
right.
the Metropolitan Career and Technical Education
Yes.
Center.
Yes. Say, please put some respect on the name. Say
The full name, the full name. This is a CTE space. I wanted to honor that and represent that.
No, that was actually my first introduction to big picture learning some years ago. I have something to ask you about that later. But you just said that asset focused um philosophy and framing around the students.
Mhm.
Is that one of the big differentiators you feel like in the big picture learning philosophy?
I believe it is. And even if it's, I think it's evolved to kind of use that intentional language around asset focus, but it's always been centered around relationships, right? Like healthy relationships to support and lift up young people, like from day one. So there was this emphasis on getting to know your students, their context, their families, right? Like, and the way it was designed, you know, the you know, as an advisor within the big picture design, right, you have a cohort of students that you accept the responsibility of supporting them holistically throughout their journey, right? In addition to whatever, your specific area of content is, and it cuts across that, right? Because it's so project based and connected to the real world learning they're doing at internships. So it is absolutely it, right? Like if you do not, and I'll say this for my network, and I think it should be applicable across education. That is like, if you love the idea of teaching your specific content area more than you love the idea of just working and loving and teaching kids and young people, you should not be in the profession.
I agree. I second that. I second that. Now, with that being said, such a strong statement. Let's make that transition because how you just framed all of that, it makes so much sense. This book, Finding Your Leadership Soul, what our students can teach us about love, care, and vulnerability. Chapter 2 is why this book.
Mm.
So that's the one question. I want everyone to read it for sure, but I'm curious if you can just share some insights why this book right now.
Yeah, it is. So many of us over time have come across these different, archetypes of leadership, right? Like beliefs on what leaders should be, they shouldn't be. This belief that leaders need to hold all this knowledge and expertise. I think, yes, we should be knowledgeable, right? Like you can't just be raggedy and be a leader, right? Like that's not what I would never support that. But also this lack of humanity that often is is found in leaders and is also celebrated like in really awkward ways. I'm like, why wouldn't you want someone that can be really open and truthful and say, I actually do have no answer for you right now, right? But I'm committed to trying to figure it out or asking for help when you need it. And sometimes that doesn't come from other adults, right? Sometimes it's the answers that we need are in front of us, in front of the young people that we serve. So, which for some people, it's just there's still this archaic belief around like teaching being just a deliverer of content and knowledge, but actually it's a beautiful bi-directional activity that happens, right? When you engage with young people in discussion and converse around issues and allow yourself to be open in those ways, right? Um, so it's a focus on this humanity, right? So it's just something that I've continued to just, I think, learn about myself, learn about the type of leaders that I believe are needed for our young people and the type of leaders that I feel like young people deserve. And it just requires a level of internal work, right? That we need to do and level of openness and appropriateness, right? That we need to do when we engage with our young people. So it was just culminating. And most importantly, I wanted to honor the lives and memories of these three young men who I knew really well and who sadly left us entirely too soon. And I am where I am, and a lot of who I am is because of my relationships with them and what they've taught me, directly and indirectly.
Those three young men you mentored, um, is it Joe? How do you say the first young man's name?
Josue.
Josue, Angel, and Sean. I I was curious. I was gonna let you bring that up. I appreciate you bringing it up. But when you kind of reflect on their lives, the influence that they had on you, like how has that shifted your perspective as a leader?
I I intentionally use the vehicle of writing letters as a way to communicate to the reader uh, my relationship with each one of them, which was each, unique and special and each a little different. I was the advisor for both Josue and for Sean. So so I knew them for 4 years when they were students, and our relationships continued post that. So when they were adults, they were no longer students. So our relationships transcended that of, teacher student, and even in the most non-conventional setup like we have at Big Picture. And with Angel, I was his principal, right? I was only his principal for 2 years because I made the decision that he couldn't no longer be a part of our community because of something that he did. So that relationship was a lot shorter. One of the things that it's a question I'm often asked, but it's the importance of, in its crudest way, right? Like us just needing to check ourselves, right? Like when we're making decisions around and about young people, like who they are and what we believe and this understanding of like in the school space, how do we allow it to be a space for young people, like people sometimes like, we refer to them as babies, refer to them as kids, right? Like whichever, especially if you're talking about kids and babies, right? If you use that, right? Allowing them to make mistakes, right? And learn from those mistakes, right? As a bit of a training ground, right? For adulthood, like for real world, before we just put them out, right? Like, and so there's part of that, right? And that's specific to the situation with Angel. And then with Sean and Josue, it was, you know, what what they modeled for me was, even when I didn't do it for them, was as love and care, like towards me as the adult. Like even in those moments where maybe I didn't do that for them, you know.
Like in what way, Carlos? Like
So
how would they
so
show it?
so Josue, I don't. There was a time where like Josue and I went to speak at an ASCD conference. Big
Okay.
shout out to the publisher. And I was a first year teacher. And I'm taking Josue, like we're in Florida, right? And we're going out to eat. And I'm like, order Josue, you can get what you want. He's like, you sure? He's like, yeah, I know what teachers make. Right. I was like, I'm good. They're gonna pay me back, Josue. Trust me. They're gonna pay me back. Right.
Yeah.
Because and it's also because I think because of the level and the type of design that our school had, he knew he knew I was a new homeowner. He knew that I was making decisions in real time around, no, I can't really do that. I'm not going to this, right? Like internalizing all that so that he was able to be like, yo, you sure? And something that didn't make the book was one time with Josue specifically, we went on an advisory trip to like
Okay.
Hampshire, and we got there and I needed to put, like pay off the rest of the stay.
Okay.
And my card bounced, right? And he came over and he came over just kind of whispers, like, hey, you all right? Like, I could call my mom, what do you need? Like into salute, like not trying to call me out, but into solution mode. That was Josue. And then
Oh man.
Sean, when my daughter was born, who was born incredibly prematurely at like 24
Okay.
weeks,
Oh wow.
like Sean, I rallied our advisory, like came to the hospital, right? I'm sorry, and he's still in high school, right? There was this, there's this kindness about Sean that he always showed. And let's not get it in, and I'm here to not mix words, right? Like let's not get it twisted. They both got under my skin a whole lot of times over the course of 4 years, right?
Right. Right.
Right? But the maturation of both of them over time was just amazing to watch. And I recognize that the more I engage with them, especially around this design that didn't push that I needed to be heavy-handed or punitive, and it emphasized relationships, and young people were able to explore interests, right? And I was about not what I wanted them to learn, but what they were interested in learning, and then figuring out how they got all the knowledge and skills that we needed to meet, right, as an LEA to ensure that they can move forward and be, contributing members to society, right? So where the emphasis started with them, right? They were the core of the curriculum. So
I,
it was a perfect storm of sorts, man.
yeah. I think for me, as I'm listening to these stories, first off, thank you for sharing those, especially the one that's not in the book. Uh, but it lifts up that subtitle even more. It really brings some humanity to it, like what our students can teach us about love, care, and vulnerability. Like you said, even in moments where you're not showing it to them, but they're giving it back to you. Um, yeah, that's powerful. Can you give me an example of like maybe a teacher or educator, someone maybe in your network who you feel like exemplifies this sort of leadership soul, who you feel like they found their leadership soul? I'm curious.
Mm. There, the the beauty of having a network like mine and is that um, there's so many schools and so many educators I've gotten a chance to observe and to meet and to hear about. Um, I'm going to go with uh, I'm going to go with someone who I believe is one of the best teachers I've ever seen, like personally, who was a mentor to me when I first started. And then I became her principal
Hmm.
um, within this, like, because she wanted to remain as a lifelong educator, and it's her calling and what she's called to do. Um, that's her name is Becky Siddons. So Becky is someone who, one of the things that I talk about in the book is not allowing the importance of us not allowing our own challenges and issues become those shortcomings and issues of our students. And I feel like Becky, as a professional, always did that from day one, right? Like she is someone that took her craft very seriously, right? Like, I believe English teacher by trade, right? By training, but has put in time over years, every year, since I've known her, to continue to get better because she wanted to diversify her toolbox to be able to support and uplift the varied interests of her students, right?
Hmm.
And you hear that, right? And you're like, all right, she's a master teacher. Yes. And she attends, I would dare say, almost every activity that any of her young people are doing outside of school.
Wow.
Um, she celebrates them and publicly, like for the longest time, she's always like celebrated, but now has this really powerful kind of like daily blog that she puts out celebrating the various things that her students are doing. Um, she is um, very like even when with like non-conventional, non-traditional school designs, there's always the possibility of some backsliding, right? Like
Hmm.
going back into that level of comfort, and we should just go back here. She has been so strong about holding steady what this particular design is and what it means to our young people, right? And being that really strong voice. And it's like so solution and asset focused, even when some of her perhaps most challenging young people who have had very challenging lives and experiences are testing, right? Because it's what we do is we test to see how real folks are when we say, I'm here for you and I got your back. Um, Remaining solution focused and asking for help anytime, even as an experienced um, an accomplished educator, asking for help whenever she needs it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Salute to Becky. I'll definitely have to
To
check
Becky,
out that blog
to Becky, salute to
for
Becky.
sure. I'm okay. I want to play a little devil's advocate here. Okay. So some educator or administrator who's listening and they're like, okay, that sounds great, Carlos. The love, the care, the vulnerability, but that's not going to work for my school, or the kids are going to walk all over us if we lead in this way. What do you say to something like that?
That means you don't really want, like, that means you really don't want to. First, you have to see it. I often believe people need to see it, right? So I'm like, yes, I can sit here, I can say this, but when I tell you, I was just like, and I've had numerous conversations. I'll say, okay, if you think that this is a worthwhile, if you believe in the words, right, and the values that I'm talking about, the next thing you should do to be responsible is to see it in action. I've got 40 schools for you to go pick from, right? So you start running out of options, right? Because they're coast to coast, right? And then interrogate that, right? And then, like, what does that mean for your context, right? If you're not willing to even go see it, right, and you say that, then that means that's not really, you don't want to do that work, right? So that ends there, right? You can go ahead, be salty, say, man, this isn't real, and that's fine. But going through the process of exploring and unpacking what that is, right?
Yeah.
And then having a conversation of like, what does that mean? And ideally not alone, right? I always tell leaders, bring those folks also that is going to impact the most, right? Like who are teachers, bring a couple of young people, right? To see what they have to say about this particular experience and how these other young people are experiencing school and what they're doing. And then begin this process of unpacking, thinking about the added benefit, dig into the data, because I know folks want to see, then he understand the data, and then talk about, is this what we want for our community? Is this an option that we want to bring forward to our community? But if you just dismiss it off the, like, I'm not speaking as a theorist, I'm a practitioner, right? So that's the difference. It's not just I'm not just sitting at a ivory tower and like research stuff, right?
Talk that talk, Carlos.
We looked up the research to validate the practice. So that's where I get tight, right? Like, because folks would be like, oh, this sounds really nice and rosy. I'm like, yeah, and it's really hard to do, right? Right. And they being young people deserve our best efforts, right? If we feel like the outcomes are going to be what they want, or what we desire for them, and kind of broaden those opportunities for young people, then we shouldn't shy away, because the work it's really hard to do.
Carlos, talk to me just a little about that research. What does the data show in some aspects?
Yeah. So for us, it's, the immediate great research is like the overwhelming majority of our young people in our schools graduate within 4 years. The majority of them are choosing to go on to post-secondary institutions. And the overwhelming majority of them are graduating and persisting at levels way higher than the comparative schools, right? That's great. The other side of the data, so that's the data that usually like, oh yes, oh, this is great. And it's a longitudinal, it's done by, the study was conducted by researchers at Boston College. It's out there, it's public, folks can dig into it. The part that gets us the most excited is about those young people that have made the decision not to go on to college, who are entering the workforce, who are finding themselves in family-sustaining careers directly connected to the internship experiences that they had, and are expanding their social capital in ways that most schools do not allow, do not lift up, do not foster. And quite honestly, a lot of post-secondary institutions don't allow for this in the same way, right?
Give me some more there. Like I love that, because that's something that is a continuing conversation on the pod, is post-secondary success, not just going to college, right? But finding helping the students find themselves in the work, something that's meaningful and creates that family sustaining wage for those who choose to maybe go the route of a credential or something like that.
Huge.
So I'm curious, talk to me more, like what are some of the things you're seeing, these post-secondary opportunities your students are taking advantage of?
Yeah, no, they're through the study and the ongoing connection and research that we're doing annually from our existing network is that we're finding, right? We want each young person to be familiar with the college application process, know that that's an option for them if they choose to, and that they're ready to enter an appropriate post-secondary institution, right? Like for them, that they have options. And then they're the ones that are the young people that are choosing not to, because they have found a specific trait, passion, they have a connection there, they have a circumstance, right? That requires that they go into the workforce. They are directing. So because of the internship component that we have, where young people are out learning in the real world and alongside professionals beginning as early as ninth grade, young people are able to learn and explore about different areas, different professions, and gain skills. And also, I think as importantly is realize early on what are the things that they absolutely don't want to do, right? Versus going on to college, getting this degree in this particular area, spending a whole lot of money and incurring a lot of debt, and realizing super late, like, oh, I absolutely do not like working with kids.
Yeah.
And I got a teaching degree, right?
Yeah. No, exactly.
I'm just, I went to school for business, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm thankful, and there's some, there's some utility to what I have, right? And what I've learned, no doubt, but, right, got into
No, I
the
get it. That's
quickly.
it. That's important. That's also important to see where I tried it. No, this is not for
Right.
me. And the sooner we can figure out what's not for me, the sooner we can get closer to what is for me. Man, you spoke about the values, the value system. So I'm gonna go back to the book. Um, as it relates to finding your leadership. So in the book you talk about Grandma Isabel.
Mm.
What
Come on, Sylvester, what you doing?
give me what's the one or top leadership lesson that you learned from Grandma Isabel?
Oh, um, no matter what was happening in my household, in my world, um, there was this level of optimism and hope that Grandma Isabel, and she has seen it all, right? Like yeah, she has seen it all. She had seen it all, um, and had been through it all, um, in her own life. And for her to remain with this joyful spirit and optimism, um, even in those hardest and most difficult times, was, I didn't realize I needed it, right? Until you're an adult and you're out of it and you get a chance to reflect back. And sometimes I even think I felt like it was a little over the top. I was like, all right, Grandma, I know you love me. Yep, we're great, right? But the importance of um, that love and affirmation, right? Around what was possible, for me and for my future, was just, there's a lot I can take. I try to carry that. And it's not always easy, right? Because there's a weight of so much that we hold and that we carry. Um, yeah. So it's try to not let things take away my joy, right? Because then I show up very differently. And and I'm imperfect in that way, right? Like that is still, I'm a work in progress.
Still working on it.
But I'm still working on it. It is, but it's a good
Yeah.
reminder. Good
Yeah.
reminder.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
One little nugget. What'd you say?
Thank you for asking that, man.
Oh no. I think it's always something good to go back to our those people who were really important to us in our early years to find that foundational values they show up and help make us who we are. But part of that, those teenage years, I'm reading the book and I find out that young Carlos is in the Bronx in his fourth floor window, uh, DJing. My question, what was on the set list
Oh man, listen here. When I got my
for the
first,
whole block? So we
listen,
know the
listen,
window's
listen,
open.
listen. The first piece of wax that I used to play repeatedly and try to blend and bring back constantly was Eric B. and Rakim's Eric B. for President.
Okay. Okay.
Like you couldn't, yeah, I couldn't stop playing that. I couldn't stop playing that. I just, yeah, that was one. And then, I had like, I'm dating myself. So I'm like, ooh, how
Yeah.
much more can I give y'all? But like I had the Fat Boys album,
Okay. Okay.
right?
Okay.
Like, you know, um, and from there, it was just like whenever I can, get a couple of coins to go grab
Yeah.
another, another record. Um,
Yeah.
uh, Raw bass, right?
Rob Bass.
And then I started getting into like trying to blend things,
Okay.
right? And that I didn't get into that until I start like or even feel like I was halfway decent on that until I started really leaning more into the R&B.
Okay.
And I love the idea of just blending some R&B joints over hip hop beats, and that was it.
Hey, that's cool. That was I was like, as a New Yorker from the Bronx, I'm like, I know you had to be playing something heavy. Um, so that Eric B and Rakim, make them clap to this. I'm right.
Absolutely.
I'm right there. Last question, and I'm gonna let you go.
Mhm.
Um, I ask everyone this, especially on the big picture learning side, project based learning, all of that. What's your vision for the future of CTE?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to see um, CTE continue to move to a space where um, young people's work and learning outside of the school building in workspaces, actual workspaces, and actually being evaluated by the professionals, credentialed professionals in the workspaces is holding true. I think it's a very missed opportunity. I believe education is everyone's business. Should be everyone's business in some way. And it's a great way to include in a really authentic and purposeful way those within our communities.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Carlos. For the book, Finding Your Leadership Soul, if someone wants to, schedule a book tour or bring you in or find copies of the book, where should they go?
Absolutely. You can go to leadershipsoul.org. Email is carlos@bigpicturelearning.org.
Outstanding.
And definitely
Go
we'll
ahead.
get back to you. So
Cool. Outstanding. Thank you so much, Carlos, for sharing your insights, talking about the wisdom from grandma, dropping the hip hop beats on us, and really the knowledge and respect of what our students can teach us about love, care, and vulnerability. If you enjoyed this episode, don't be selfish. Share with a friend and make sure you go and catch that book. I have mine, so you should get yours too. Until the next episode, remember, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Global CTE Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to be the first to know about future episodes.